Apologies for absence.
Minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Oh yeah, sorry. They put my glasses on, don't they?
Yeah.
Minutes, would you like to do the minutes? Is everybody content that the minutes are an accurate record of the last meeting?
Yes.
Yes. You happy for me to sign them? Now should we do apologies forms?
That would be appropriate, Chairman.
Excellent.
Apologies from Councillors Ian Robertson and Jason Pritchard, and also Simon Bowie sends his apology.
Members' interests? Are there any interests to declare? No. Excellent. We can move then straight to the audit report, which seems to be fairly interesting if standard reading.
Yes.
Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Shall I kick off?
Please.
Okay, good evening, members. So the report you have from EY is our update to the audit results report on pages 9 to 54 of your papers. You'll recall that I ran through the same similar version of this audit results report at the meeting in September. What we've sought to do in this version is just provide some annotations on pages within the report, just to summarise the very latest position on our audit. Just to be very clear on the audit of the Council's financial statements, I'll come on to the pensions in a moment, but in terms of the rest of our audit of the Council's accounts, our work is complete. The matters that we've summarised by way of an update are the additional amendments that have been agreed with officers to the accounts. Most of those are reclassification errors. There were a couple of items where valuations have been increased by way of the outcome of our work on undertaking audit work on the valuation of the Council's assets. But again, nothing untoward or unusual that comes part of an audit process of reviewing valuation assumptions and methodologies. So I'm not concerned at all about our prospects of concluding the audit and issuing an unqualified opinion and an unqualified value for money conclusion. What the hold-up has been since our last meeting is obviously receiving the assurances from the Northamptonshire Pension Fund external auditors. You'll recall at the last meeting I provided an explanation as to why that work had not yet commenced. I'm very pleased to say that work has now started, and that work started in the middle of December, following KPMG issuing their statutory audit opinion on the Northamptonshire County Council accounts, including the pension fund at the beginning of December. That enabled EY to start our work on the Northamptonshire Pension Fund in the middle of December. Actually, our work on the pension fund is now substantially concluded. The only matter that's been drawn to my attention by the pension fund team is to ensure that the schedule of results that the officers receive from your actuary has been based on the same rate of return on the investment on assets that's disclosed in the pension fund accounts, which is an amount of 7.4%, and Daventry have used that out-of-turn figure in your calculation of the net pension liability. I'm not aware of any other matters arising from the pension fund audit, and I understand there's a couple of investment confirmations that our team were waiting for. Once we're in receipt of that, then, if we're not already, the team will be able to finish their work and have it reviewed by the partner in charge, and the letters quality reviewed to be issued to me as the engagement lead, not just for Daventry but for some of the other districts and boroughs in Northamptonshire. Once I'm in receipt of that letter, I will be then able to close the audit and issue my opinion. That process should not take very long at all, because if there are no further matters arising from the audit of the pension fund, we should then be able to close down our audit files, and I'll be able to link in with Audra to obtain final letters of representation and issue our audit opinion. So I'll be guided by this committee as to the appropriate process to conclude from here, bearing in mind I've now come to you twice with an audit results report. Obviously, from my perspective, we're not waiting for anything else from officers here. We've got no substantial work to conclude either on our audit at Daventry. I appreciate the frustrations of still waiting for a final audit opinion, but there's nothing from that's holding up me now being able to do this at Daventry, and I'm keen to move on and plan for the 1920 audit and come back to this next committee with our audit plan.
Committee comments?
I do.
I need it.
At the last committee, where Neil obviously gave his update, and that was at a position where he was only part-way through the audit. And there was some debate at the time when we presented the accounts as to whether you wanted to delegate the final approval of those accounts to the chair in consultation with myself. And at the time, the committee decided that they didn't want to because, in fact, Daventry's audit wasn't complete. And what you're hearing from Neil tonight is that Daventry's audit is complete. It's just subject to this confirmation of the county's pension, of which he's not expecting there to be any issues. So my question really is, through you, Chair, is whether the committee would be happy, now that EY have confirmed our audit and the position, for you to delegate the approval of the accounts, because otherwise they're going to have to wait till April before we can get that process concluded. So it's whether...
So is it a speed thing? It would make it quicker for it to finalise?
Yes, I mean, from what Neil has said, you know, in a matter of weeks now, we may well be in a position to sign off those accounts. Now, corporate governance are not due to meet again until April. We're already well outside of the timescales of what the normal statutory sign-off would be, and you've heard all of the reasons as to why that's the case. With this audit report in front of you that's really concluding Daventry's and that there's not really any issues, we're in a different position to where we were last time, because essentially Daventry's audit is complete and the findings are in this report. So if we wait till April, there won't be anything further to update you on for you to sign the accounts off. So just wanted to know, Chair, if your committee...
Yeah, I'd be happy with that if we have a letter from yourself to say that you've not found anything and you're going to sign them off. So I'd like a piece of paper rather than a verbal.
So the main piece of paper you'll get from EY will be our statutory audit opinion, and that will confirm the completion of the audit, and that can get circulated to members. Obviously, what I will also do is write a confirmatory email to Audra when everything's been concluded from our end, which can also be made available to you as members by way of closure of this process as well. Given that I've presented two versions of this report, I'm not intending to do another version.
No, I didn't mean that.
The other thing you will get from me, and I hear the word letter, is actually by way of our requirements under the PSEA contract, we also have to produce what's called an annual audit letter as well. And if we are to get things in good order, actually the annual audit letter attached to an email to Audra to say the audit's concluded might be a way of servicing what you're asking for.
And sorry, Chair, through you, just to be sure, I wouldn't be asking the Chair to approve the accounts without the audit opinion being completed.
Right,
Okay.
fine.
I did understand part of the audit report as an expert in it, and I thought it was quite a good comment. It was interesting about the asset valuation part, about the portfolio versus best value, and those properties that were valued by reference to appreciated replacement cost. And I thought the auditors were spot on the money on that. Hang on.
Well, it's difficult with asset valuations. I think there's different ways in which your assets can be valued.
Yeah.
We have regard to the CIFA code and what we see through our work elsewhere, and I don't think there's been any trouble in terms of that agreeing those findings with the officers here. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So the $64,000 question is, given that you're also auditing the county, when will you be ready to give you the pension valuation? Because that's what we're waiting for, isn't it?
So I'm not the partner in
I know,
charge
but
of it.
as in you are EY.
Yeah.
You are the EY
So
representative here.
so I've been speaking to the pension fund team, and that's why I can say that the audit substantially concluded. I've been told I'll get these letters within the next week. But I dropped Alder a line this morning just to say that I will just continue to keep the CFOs and Northamptonshire up to date on exactly when that's going
Because the
through.
EY pension team have got to agree with the county's trustees, the audit.
Yeah, well, they've got a responsibility to issue opinion on the pension fund accounts, but that doesn't prevent the pension fund auditors providing a letter of assurance to me to enable me to sign off the Daventry accounts. The pension fund auditors undertake sufficient work on membership data, the asset valuations to enable me to say the figures that are in Daventry's accounts represent a true and fair view.
And is this a triennial valuation or the standard annual valuation?
I think it's part of the standard annual valuation and the accounting. I think across local government this is an important year where a number of triennial valuations are taking place. And that triennial valuation should inform this year's actuarial schedule of results as well for 1920.
Because obviously going forward, you know, you were late with the first bit, you seem to be late with the second bit. Will we have it done by April? Is there any need for me to be able to sign it off? Because you'll be back in April telling us you're still waiting for data.
No, I don't think we'll be in that position at all. I think we'll be done well before April. I think Alder's right to be guided by you about the appropriate process from here. I'm seeing different approaches across the county in this situation. Some committees are wanting to meet again, some are taking delegated authority. I've just come from South Northamptonshire where I've given the same assurance in response to the member's question about getting a consistent message across Northamptonshire on those audits I'm signing off at the position I'm able to. But given that within days of receiving a letter, the pension fund team have been giving me updates on where the work is. I'll be getting heads up on any particular matters I need to deal with. I'm only aware there's one point which I've already checked at Daventry. I don't foresee that I'll be still having to explain myself to you in April about why we're still waiting for things. And I think it's also worth saying that whilst there's been questions about why we couldn't have got going on a pension fund earlier, this was driven by professional standards and the ability to actually commence one until KPMG issued their opinion on the county council accounts for the prior year.
Very committee, Kevin.
Yeah, I've just got a couple of questions just for clarification, if you don't mind. Mainly because I've read it, so I feel I need to.
You need to.
Yes. There was obviously lots of movement, well, not lots, that's not true. There were some movements in the funds where it didn't have any material effect at the end of the day. On page 14, it mentions on the update, one of the adjustments increased the earmark reserve by 277k. So I presume that's just been taken. Into reserves.
Yeah. Chair?
Sorry, through you, Chair.
Yes. Happy to respond to that. The 277,000 relates to a very specific item that in previous audits with KPMG, if throughout the budget process we've agreed through committee to do works, but they haven't necessarily been done, we put those monies into, we used to put those monies into a provision. So to say that they were committed, I'll give an example. There was some works going to be done to these offices to create an interview room, but it wasn't done in the year that the committee had said yes, crack on with it. So because our interpretation was that money is committed because members have said that's what they want, it goes into a provision, and a provision then means the money is committed and it's not counted as reserves because it's committed. Now, EY's approach is that because it's not contractually committed with a supplier, then it's not committed and it's reserves. So it's not that we've missed 277,000 or done something wrong, it's just that previously and in many years with KPMG we've always had those as provisions, and now they're earmarked reserves and treated differently.
So it's gone as earmarked reserves?
It has, yes.
Right, thank you. And on page 41, which is the fees, it says the final fee basically to be confirmed. Will that coming? When will that happen?
So once we've concluded the audit, probably Audra and I will probably get locked into a room and have a conversation about where we've ended up. I think just to go back to what is in the minutes, because I think what I said in the minutes and what I said at the last meeting still holds true, and I want to be very clear that there will be no fee conversation that relates to why we are where we are and the timetables and the delays. That we recognise the impact that's having on council members and the transition from previous auditor to EY as well that links to this. If we believe there are any aspects of our work where the scope has extended or we've had to undertake additional work that we believe is above and beyond the expectation that's set in the scale fee set by public sector audit appointments, we should propose a fee variation. The process would be that I'd have a conversation with Audra and set out supporting detail of what I think that fee is, the skill mix that's been used in it and what the audit procedures are. Audra will give a view on that, whether Audra agrees or not as management to that proposal. PSAA ultimately determine any fee variation. So even if Audra and I reach a position where we don't agree, but we still believe that from EY's perspective there's a legitimate fee variation that we'll seek, PSAA ultimately will be the ones that determine.
They are arbitrator.
Yeah.
Right.
But for the purposes of you as a committee, I will bring back the position in the annual audit letter. That will be the place in which you can confirm the final position one way or another. And if Audra, on behalf of management, would disagree with that position, we'll make it very clear that this is a pending PSAA approval, and we'd make it clear whether it's been agreed with management or not in our annual audit letter.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, if I may. It's a useful point that I'd just like to air with members as well, that should any of those discussions include a fee variation because the materiality level changed from 75% to 50% because we're effectively a new customer, I just want members to know that I would be arguing with that, in that they knew when they tendered for the business, by the very virtue of tendering, that we would be a new customer and should have taken that into account. So that's just for the record, Chair.
Very happy to have that on the record. Just on page 13 of the other areas of audit focus, it was touched on slightly by Councillor James in terms of the investment property. The others seem to have the different interpretations from previously. The 4 bullet points at the bottom of the page, following our initial report, we identified the following. Page 13 of your report, other areas of audit focus.
Page 21.
Alright, sorry, because I'm looking at the electronic version.
Okay.
The electronic version isn't numbered the same, but it's your report, page 13.
Yeah. Okay.
So, understating of investment value, understating as external site works, reclassification of land and buildings, and impairment. There seems to be quite a lot there in terms of both number and value.
Yeah.
Is that a EY view on life compared to the previous incumbent? Or
well, I can't speak for the previous incumbent, and as a matter for order, all I would say is that all of those matters have arisen from reviewing the underlying assumptions implicit in the valuation of those assets and how they've been classified, and what we believe is an appropriate value and where it should be in the accounts. So where appropriate, we do engage our EY real estate colleagues as well if we need to corroborate that position. Actually, on all of these, we've been able to do quite a lot of that activity ourselves as the external auditor, because there's available observable market data and there's underpinning guidance in the code of practice about how assets should be valued, particularly those on depreciated replacement cost. So I can't speak for the predecessor auditor, but
I'm sure Audra will.
Chair, I'm happy to reply. Valuations are a complex area, and What I would say is that where the auditors have engaged with our valuers, it's not a black and white piece of work, and there is debate to be had. And I'm happy that in terms of the points that were raised by EY and the valuation people's response, that it was right to make these changes.
Do other members of the committee have any comments or views?
Well, they're perfectly valid points, particularly the one on DRC, where it was common practice to omit site works many years ago. And I think it must be 20 years since the RICS published a guidance note saying, hang on chaps, what about the site works in the event of, and so on, which are quite substantial these days in particular. So that was a perfectly valid point. And the portfolio versus best value, and lots of our properties would not be sold off as a portfolio anyway. So that was a good valid point too. It just wouldn't happen. So I think they've done the right thing. As for the predecessors, well,
we weren't challenged before, Chair, is all I can say on some of these points, and where it's been picked up, we've responded positively.
Yes, I agree with that.
Do the committee have any other comments on this report? Do the committee have a view on delegating the authority to the chair and the Section 151 officer to sign off the audit subject to the receipt of the appropriate audit confirmation letter?
Agreed.
Yeah. All happy? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You may just stay with us if you wish to, otherwise... Yeah, no problem. Could you make sure you doesn't steal anything on the way? Thank you. Can we move to internal audit?
Chair. So members, what you have before you is the second internal audit progress report of the year, and the last one of those before I produce the annual audit review towards the end of the financial year, which will be presented to this committee in May. We'll pick up the resourcing of the audit plan and the delivery of that, and then any particular significant issues that have arisen from our work to date. In terms of the audit plan itself, we currently have now a full complement of staff following the appointment of an experienced corporate fraud officer in December, which was as a result of a secondment of the former officer to another role in the council. In terms of the progress on the audit plan, that vacant post for a short period hasn't had any detrimental effect on those audits, and we've made really good progress this year, as we have in previous years. And to date also we have not cancelled any audits or conversely added any to the current plan. In terms of the work and the plan and our delivery of that, if you look at the appendix on page 65 onwards, this is the detail of the plan which you approved back in April and the delivery of that work to date. There are obviously in there two audits that we'll come on to, and one of those was presented in further detail at the previous progress report that were minimal assurance, but we only have those two. But there are some notable audits that are nearing completion or have been completed during the year, including with some work we've done on homelessness prevention, for instance, which has created a number of recommendations to improve the control environment within that area. But also notably, for the first time, some of the external type reviews that we've done to look at the completion of the Rainsborough crematorium, for instance. And also we've done some work this year which has provided good assurance on the contractual arrangements from the client side for the Daventry North arrangement. Similarly, we've just completed also our audit of the West Northamptonshire Joint Planning Unit, which is something we do on an annual basis. So progress has been good. The results of those audits has been favourable. You'll see towards the end of the appendix there's a register of management action plans, and what you'll notice from there is there are so few on there now in terms of management's response to our work and turning around the implementation of those recommendations that we've made. And in fact, just over the past week since this went to agenda, we've completed off another couple of pieces of work within there, notably the work around cyber security, which was completed early in the year by our external or contracted IT auditors, TIA. If we move back to the main body of the report, on page 57, you'll be familiar with the table there, which goes over the page, which gives the level of assurance and the comparison year on year. The ratios over the page and the indicators over the page show us that we've got quite a strong control environment, and that's continued for a number of years. And although the ratio currently stands at 86 to 14 in terms of the full substantial assurance ratio, assurance opinions as opposed to limited minimal, that is likely to improve as we complete the financial assurance work, as we're into that now towards the last quarter. You'll also notice, as I indicated earlier, about the management action plans and management's response. There's been an upward trend in the implementation of agreed recommendations, particularly around the high priority, which currently sits at 95%, and of all agreed recommendations, which is on an upward curve also. In terms of the two audits to date that have received a minimal assurance opinion, one of those was dealt with in detail and signed off as part of the progress report last, which was on the shop improvement grants, so that the detail of that isn't included in this particular report. But we've also, as I mentioned at the last progress report now, we've moved on and completed work on the Abbey income, which is around the ad hoc room bookings and the income that we receive for that. You'll see a level of detail in here which, and I'll pick out a few bits from here, which says that the system in place was not fit for purpose, and that was one of the key things we picked out. It was quite early in the audit that we that this sort of was recognised, and although there was certainly a high risk of income not being accurately accounted for, there was no real evidence of or suggestion of fraud from that work. Our recommendations asked management to undertake a complete review of the process and define their approach for dealing with the ad hoc room bookings. And what they have taken is the route of ensuring that all ad hoc room bookings are dealt with under the sundry debtor process. And as a part of that, it has its own control mechanisms around it, which is something which is quite a strong control environment, which is controlled by accountancy, revenues and benefits. The final audit report for the Abbey income was presented to SMT in November. They acknowledged deficiencies and identified that management deal with that urgently, as they have done. We've completed an initial audit assessment just this past couple of weeks, which, although we are unable to, at this point, to sign it off, there has been good improvement in terms of implementation, but there are a number of smaller areas and a number of enhancements that we've recommended further to what we made in the original report. So what we will be looking to do is undertake a formal follow-up in March to ensure that all the processes are effectively embedded. The only other aspect, and we picked up over the page on 4.13, the ICT audit work, the two pieces of work that TIA have done and have completed, and in fact there is only the follow-up work from that has been done, and there's only one recommendation outstanding around that work. which is at the end of the paragraph there, which is the review of the ICT services standard document, which is due to be implemented by the end of February. The only other last point I would like to mention is the section in page 61, which is around the Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme. And just to note our annual stakeholder customer satisfaction survey there, which I'm pleased to report has had yet again a good response from both yourselves and senior management and management across the authority, who we have there 93% of respondents, 13 out of 14 agreed that we agree or strongly agree that the internal audit is providing an effective service to the council. I'm open to any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Katie, any questions for Scott? Kevin?
Yeah, looking at page 58, and that's the one I look at, which is the agreed recommendations and things like that, because it's at 95%, which is a big move from where it's been before, let's be honest. So mine would be the ones which are still outstanding as high priority. And I know you mentioned, is it homeless?
Homelessness prevention audit that we've undertaken, yeah. Although it's at draft report stage at the moment, we're just finalising off that work.
Is that why there's still 4 still outstanding?
No, what that appendix says there is it acknowledges that that particular report is in the draft report stage.
Right.
There are 10 recommendations made and 4 of those are high priority.
Right.
Once that work is finalised and completed, an action plan will be produced and then it will appear on that internal audit register one, which is the latter one here.
Okay.
And that's when it's down then to management to implement them and notify me of the implementation of those recommendations. With that particular audit though, what I will be reporting as part of the final report is the majority of them management of audit actions, so there's been some good progress.
Right. So they'll move to the internal audit register, management action. So the one that's outstanding for council and tax, that's still outstanding at the moment.
Yeah.
But
And concerningly, it's more than 3 months outstanding for a high priority.
That's what I was looking at.
Yeah. There's 2 areas on that appendix which show that there are 4 recommendations that are overdue by 3 months or more. We've reported those over the last progress report and also in the annual audit review. We're currently doing undertaking the 2019 financial audits of both those areas for council tax and NDR with a view to closing out those matters with management. And I've just been meeting with him just this past week and I'm confident that we will be able to do that.
So although it says more than 3 months, it sounds like they're more than 9 months overdue.
They are. You may recall from some of when I discussed this at the annual audit review, or you may not, but when we discussed these issues back then, it was a case of those recommendations that were there, the 4 of these, were around the service manager trying to implement electronic means instead of just addressing the recommendations we put to him. He was trying to address them by introducing electronic means via e-forms and other electronic means, and that takes time to implement if you're going to do it properly. He has been successful in some of the areas around council tax, and there's just these 1 or 2 areas that are left that he hasn't managed to just get over the line.
But isn't that being seduced by the big shiny thing rather than getting the urgent and important action dealt with whilst dealing with the big shiny things? Surely we should have action on the high priority whilst he fixes it however he wants to fix it downstream digitally.
We were comfortable with the control environment, hence our substantial assurance from last year's council tax audit report. If I felt that it was of significance enough to affect that opinion, then I would have escalated it further to SMT.
We look forward to it being addressed then by whoever it is. I think it's not we might need to escalate it.
I think, Chairman, I might just add that for both council tax and NDR, our collection rates are on target. So there is no
Yeah, but I think that, to me, it's a systemic issue. In fact, our collection rates are on target is kind of masking a systemic issue around responding to internal audits. And the reason we put those targets in, if you recall, a couple of years ago, the level of assurance target rates on the between 4.7 and 4.8 of 80, 20 and 90% was because we weren't achieving that some years ago, and that's why we put those in. And I think it's important that we keep pressure on management to make sure they deal with particularly the high priority recommendations from internal audit.
Yeah, I think if I might just come back on that, Chairman, my point wasn't that we were sort of hiding behind those figures. We are taking action to deliver on the recommendations, and the point was it's not having an adverse effect on our collection rates.
Okay. New point, I guess. we'll not split hairs on that. Right, committee, are you happy to accept the recommendations in item 2 on the report? Okay, thank you. We then move on to the risk management process progress then.
Yes, that's me, Chairman. So this is an annual progress report on our work on risk management. I think the first thing to say is we've not done very much different in the last year as we've had previously. We have good embedded processes in place. The paper takes you through, well, firstly the introduction just to confirm this committee's role in the risk management process as an overview of the effectiveness. Section 4 takes us in a little bit of detail into the work of around risk management, in particular the strategic risk register, which is going through its annual review. That's been sort of kept an eye on this year, particularly around some of the big issues, the external pressures on us in delivery, notably the government uncertainty about government and then through a general election, Brexit situation, and also the unitary agenda. So we've had a sort of close eye on the strategic risk register in regard to those issues, but not entirely relating to those. We've also continued to look at issues arising from our service risk registers and some of the major projects that go on. So all that goes into a mix, and then we have proposing some changes to the strategic risk register. A working copy of the risk register is shown in the papers at page 75 through to 79. I'm conscious that's in black and white and small print, but apart from the chairman who's got it in glorious Technicolor on his the screen there, but the purpose of the report is to talk about the process as opposed to get stuck into the detail of this particular paper. The review of the strategic risk register is for strategy group and council, and the report is will be on the agenda for strategy group on the 6th of February. So this is to evidence that things are happening, the review is underway. The review so far has, started off with the Office of Risk Management Working Group, has been reported through to senior management team, and we'll go forward to portfolio holders meeting next week before it goes on then to strategy group. Portfolio holders get regular updates of the strategic risks, and also look at the risks arising from the major projects. So they've got a reasonably good handle on our risk management processes. Moving on then to 4.2, service risk registers. We're now at a stage where we're looking at our service plans for the next financial year, and we'll review the risk registers at service level as part of that service planning process. Any major issues that come from that will be forwarded on to the risk management working group. Section 4.4 3 talks about the risk management working group itself. That's a well-established group now, meets bi-monthly to consider risks wherever they might arise and the impact on the strategic risk register. That, as I say, its main piece of work of late has been looking at the strategic risk register. So I think in summary, and the conclusion is that risks are part of any organisation's administrative landscape and should be registered and managed. Good progress continues to be made in managing the Council's strategic and service risks. Thank you, Chairman. That is me.
Cabinet Committee? Kevin? You can always start, Kevin.
Thank you. On the first sheet, page 71, beg your pardon.
Item number?
4.1.
Thank you.
First, bottom sentence, some amendments were suggested. Now, I don't know if suggested means they've been incorporated into the plan. The only thing I was looking at, so I've not got it in colour, so on page 78, there on risk number 11 seems to have been highlighted or what. Would that be the one that's been amended?
That's one of the ones that have been amended. Unfortunately, it doesn't show on this, but if the chairman will allow me to look at his screen, then I can perhaps just take you quickly through the strategic risk register. So the first proposed changes are to risk 4, which is page 76, and that's just a change to the risk description, and is putting in the words uncertain impacts around Brexit. It is highlighted, but it doesn't show. It doesn't show in black and white in this paper. Then moving on, we had a discussion at senior management team on Monday this week, and we've made or proposing another change on risk 5. So in the description of risk 5, we've got the same issue about adding the words uncertain and impacts around Brexit, and the residual risk rating for that risk, we're proposing that is reduced from significant likelihood to low likelihood, following some discussions between the business manager and the relevant portfolio holder, which is to do with the more greater focus on the numbers of projects that we've got for the remaining life of the council.
Will that change the residual risk rating from red to amber?
It does actually change it to amber. It goes from C2 to D2. But as I say, that's sort of not even hot off the press. It hasn't actually made it to this document. On risk 8, there's an additional mitigation being suggested there. The final bullet points, external endorsements, etc. And then on to risk 11, which picks up the point you were making. A few changes are being proposed on this one. So, firstly, the description. Then we're just adding in the words in brackets. Structural changes order has been laid in Parliament. To note, that's where it sits at the moment. There's just a bit of tidying up of the words around the first consequence around financial forecast, accurate financial forecast. Onto the mitigation, then some tidying up of the words, and I think a new mitigation item offered there. So reinforce business as usual approach for key outputs, and the second one, future Northants programme is progressing, so it's recognising that. And in terms of the actual bit that you did pick up in the risk ratings, we're suggesting that the high likelihood is changed to very high likelihood for both the inherent and residual risks, and that's really recognising that the unitary is almost a done deal now. We're just waiting for the structural changes order to be made. So it's that position moving on since the register was last reviewed by members.
Very good. Any other comments? It could be suggested the process, just looking at it blindly, is that there are 4 of 11 red risks. But in fact, there's only one really that you've got any control over, and that's risk 5, which you just said is going down to amber.
That's correct.
Based on the latest.
Yeah.
So the real thing for me in terms of process management, which is what you're asking us to do, is to track the movement in the risks over time. Maybe that's a presentational issue, so you can see the movement of risk over time, whether it's gone up or down, because you have clearly moved risk 11 up, and I think we all understand why, and why the processes themselves are mitigating, because you can't almost mitigate what you don't know you've got to do. But it would be helpful on the others, particularly where it's gone from a red risk to an amber risk, and whether or not within the context of the amber it's gone down as well, because the difference between 3 and 4, a B3 to a C3, is different. And if there has been any movement, it's difficult to tell from this in terms of process. Any other comments? Yeah. Are you content, committee, to go with the recommendation that the risk management process is noted? Thank you very much. I think no urgent business has been advised to me.
No, Chair.
No? On that basis, thank you all for attending tonight, and I look forward to seeing you in 3 or 4 months' time. April. Is it April? Is it